One of the first things we're taught as a community organizer is the organizer speaks 10% of the time. The person they're interviewing speaks 90% of the time. It's about their story. It's not about you. So all those things played into my photography, and what I want to do with my work, with my art, is let other people be able to tell their stories. An example would be a ice cream man that I met last week, actually. It's one of those old school ice cream men that you see a lot of Latinx communities, where he's walking around pushing the ice cream cart and ringing the bell and yelling out, helados, helados, which is ice cream in Spanish. I walked up to him and I said, hey, I'm doing this series on immigrants. I really want to capture your story, and I really want to capture your photo. He said, yes, I really, really want to tell you my story. So I want to invite you to my birthday party, where you meet my family and you get to hear our immigrant story, why we came to the United States.
Welcome to Binder. I'm Ray McManus. When I think about Hector's story growing up in Lexington, and there are a lot of similarities in our, we'll just say, interactions with law enforcement, I will never be able to fully understand the type of fear and even resentment that people of color have had over the years because of the way they have been treated. But I do know what it's like to be judged by authority based on just simply the way you look. The difference, however, and this is the part that I think all of us need to remember, in all those interactions that I may have had where I felt like I was singled out because of the way I looked, or I got mouthy back because of that, there was never a moment where I felt like my life was in jeopardy. And that's something that I know folks back home that I grew up with don't like to hear the word privilege, because they don't feel like they were privileged by a socioeconomic perspective. But when you're pulled over for a traffic violation and you wonder if that's it, that's how you die, there is a moment where your privilege as a white person does stand out.
Let's be honest, last year when the protests happened after George Floyd, it was the police who was the aggressor at these rallies. They were kettling people, peaceful protesters, circling them with bombs so that there was no place they could run, and then making them explode in order to hit us with tear gas. I was one of those victims. And so out there, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about capturing their images, running around, so I don't really have time to think. And then when I'm going through these images, I see a few gold mines and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I got that. Like one of the images that I have in this exhibit that I'm calling Black and Blue, where I have two young black men confronting the police, explaining to the police who they are and demanding that they respect their dignity to exist. I'm Héctor Vaca Cruz. I am a photographer. I used to live here in Colombia, but I'm originally from New York. But now I live in Charlotte, where I'm a community organizer, so social justice is my life. What got me into this is skateboarding and the punk rock scene, being able to see injustices, but also see that I was not the only, reject.
Something about skateboarding and the punk rock scene that brings us to become artists, man. I know similar sort of trajectory as a poet. There is something about being outside of society, and it's kind of that reject thing. But community obviously is something that I think really comes out in your work, at least the work that I have seen. And I think one of the things that really kind of drew me to your pieces specifically are the way in which you capture the worker. And of course, not just the worker at any given time, and the worker during a pretty tough time to be a worker, right? Mm-hmm. In this pandemic.
Well, when we moved to South Carolina from New York in 1986, my parents bought their first home. And I remember my dad working 3 jobs and my mom working 2 jobs to raise 4 kids. And so I got to see what it's like to struggle sometimes. That made me more sensitive to the plight of working families. That and being the son of immigrants, my father being treated badly since he got into this country, especially when he moved to South Carolina. And then my own experiences growing up in Lexington, South Carolina, where me being of Puerto Rican Ecuadorian descent, who's a U.S. citizen, all of a sudden I became an undocumented Mexican. Because to a lot of people, all of us Latinxs are Mexican. But once I became a community organizer, I got to hear other people's stories, hear more, and the opportunity to travel, be able to go to Eastern Europe, but other parts of the United States and see other people's stories. All those things really played into what I'm sensitive to, what are the things that are important to me. And then in 2018, when I decided I wanted to do photography, I decided that I wanted to be able to capture people's stories through photos and give them a voice.
Man, if I could, I would reach across right now and hug you, because as one who grew up working class but white, which meant, I was given certain privileges that I didn't realize at the time, that I even had, but started working when I was like 14, in manual labor jobs, worked with a tree crew. I've done every manual, nasty labor job you can think of, and got lucky. Found my way to college, which I don't really know how that happened, but then everything kind of took off from there, and that's where I discovered poetry. And I always wanted to come back to the work because I always felt that there are stories there that just don't get told, and unfortunately for a lot of folks who work, it's just that. It's just work. And we think nobody wants to hear this story. Nobody cares about this story. What I find is that when people do hear about that story, they do begin to empathize more and understand a little bit more about the plight. And of course, you're talking about two really important stories that not just need to be told, but are important to the fabric of this country and especially of this region, the immigrant story and the worker story. And so when, I've always been sort of fascinated, like when you are trying to capture that, do you just spring up on them? I mean, do you just like, hey, I'm going to take your picture? Because you do say you want to capture that story.
When I first started on photography, I went out to capture everything I could find. It was a learning process, so I needed to get as many photos under my belt as I could. But even then, I was choosing the locations that I wanted to capture. Sometimes I see an elderly lady reading a book, and I just wanted to capture that image, or a child having fun in the park. Just being able to capture those specific images. So I was intentional in that sense. But as I've developed as a photographer, I've started becoming a little more intentional, actually walking and approaching people, asking them, hey, can I make your photo? I noticed this light is hitting you well. Or I'm doing a series on the elderly, which I'm calling the senior warriors, or a series around immigrant essential workers. And I want to be able to tell your story. Can I please get a photo of you? So I've become a lot more intentional in that sense. But I've also had a lot of great opportunities to get these photos because I am a community organizer. So I meet people on a daily basis, whether it be a tenant, an immigrant, an elderly person. I'm talking to people every day. And when I hear the stories, I ask them, can I get your photo? You have to be genuine. You can't just be random. You can't just say, hey, I want to get your photo. They have to know you. They have to trust you and tell them the truth of why you want to do it. And people, at least 90% of the time, will say, yes, I want you to get my photo. When I'm out there photographing, yes, I'm thinking about the images I want to get. I'm being intentional, but I'm also thinking about what's going on around me. I cannot concentrate on them until I'm ready to edit and really look through them. But then I go through it slowly. Sometimes from one event, it takes me about a month to go through the images, but that also gives me an opportunity to breathe and really come at it from the perspective of somebody who's not me, to see what somebody else might also find meaning in.
What's beautiful about photography is it's a meta language, right? I mean, it doesn't matter whether you speak English, Spanish, Russian. You can look at a photograph and you can interpret, based on your own experiences or similar experiences, put a foreground and a background to what's going on in that particular image. And I do think that poetry and photography do sort of lend itself as sort of really cool cousins at the party, especially when you talked about bringing voice and adding voice to those who have traditionally not had a voice, which is odd when you think about it. There's a poem on a piece of paper cannot speak, and a photograph on a wall cannot speak, yet they totally speak, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so when I'm reading a poem or I'm looking at a photograph, there's a conversation that has taken place, and the way you capture their expressions, they're so matter of fact, but yet they're not menacing. They're not like, how dare you take this picture, or I hate it here. There's a look on their face like, I'm doing what I need to do to survive. And I feel like they're talking to me on top of the dangers of the pandemic and the distance that we were feeling socially and the isolation that we were carrying with that. We had protests and there was a lot of unrest. Maybe talk a little bit about your experience in capturing what you were looking for when you were around any of the protests.
Well, as you said, last year was a very difficult year for everybody. We had the pandemic, but we also had George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, a story we hear really often. For example, in Charlotte, there was a man who called the police and said, "Hey, I would like to turn myself in. I have a gun I would like to turn into you. Could you please come get it?" And when the police arrived, they killed him on the spot. People were hurting. People needed to be heard. So that's the reason I was out there, but partially influenced by my own experiences with the police. In 2006, a police officer came to me and put a gun to my head and accused me of stealing a car. And every time I tried to explain myself, he would respond with profanity and tell me that I was lying. And he kept hitting me across the head with the gun until my white supervisor walked up and said, "Yes, we're leaving work right now." And then all of a sudden, the police officer apologized. So that right there made me want to go out and capture this so much more, because it's time that people speak up. It's time that we stop saying, this is a one-time thing, or the person must have deserved it. No one deserves to die. If they did something, they deserve a process to determine whether they did something or not. I was out there because we needed to actually speak up, and people were speaking up.
Yeah. I think that to me is one of the most captivating parts to this entire show. There's still the tendency to distance ourselves from things that make us uncomfortable or things that seem scary. And of course, that narrative has been so played in this country. You know, the brown skin, that's the scary individual. And, you know, when you see these photographs, it really counters those narratives, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and we start to see that there is a familiarity.
People, when they approach me, they assume I don't speak English because of the color of my skin, the way I look. And when they hear me, they're like, "Oh my God, you speak English?" I'm like, "Yes, I do."
You're so articulate.
I was born in New York. So meet people where they're at, talk to them, get to know them. Let's forget about the preconceptions we have of people that we've been taught by prior generations. It's time for us to really become the world that we want to be, that we become the change we want to be. And the only way to become that change is to open your mouth and say what's on your mind, say what's hurting you so that others can understand it, but also ask others. So that's what I want people to get out of my work. Just really have a conversation, because that's the whole reason I take these images, so that people can have conversations about them.
Hector's work is part of Hindsight 2020, on view through October 24th. You can learn more about his photography at hectorvacacruz.com. Coming up.
I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share, but while I'm doing it...
He's always telling me, why did you make me do this?
Why did I say yes?
A true power couple, Jesus and Loli, after the break.
Hey y'all, producer Drew here to fill up your social calendar for September with some exciting CMA programming. On September 8th and the 14th, take a tour and get a new perspective on Amanda McCaver's Bright Little Day Stars with volunteer coordinator and installation assistant Jackie Palmieri. On September 22nd, grab a cocktail and a seat for a panel discussion featuring Carol Suvian, executive producer and director of the Peabody Award-winning and Emmy-nominated PBS series, Craft in America. On September 25th, get your dancing shoes ready for Shea Alexander Presents Live on Boyd Plaza with popular Charlotte-based outfit Reggie Graves and Jazz Theory. You can find out more about these and all of our upcoming programs and events on our website, www.columbiamuseum.org. And now, back to the show.
Well, my poem is called ALMA, And it goes as it follows. Querida madre, dear mother, these days I think about you all the time. Yesterday I remember your meat stew and I made one. It did not taste the same. It did not have that extra flavor from your hands or the smell of your apron. The kids said they liked it. I thanked them and I smiled. 2 tears escaped, hiding not to be seen. They did not see the 2 eviction letters from the bank either. I told them that we are going to stay some days at Alejandra's. They were happy about spending some time with their cousins, and that suited me. Later, I remember that time that you told me to choose my favorite doll. I crossed the desert holding Alejandra's hand, and the doll stuck to my chest like an amulet. I still keep my doll. I still have Alejandra. I'll be fine. Don't worry.
This is my poem Witness, Testigo in Spanish. Tengo que ir a casa. Duro día en el trabajo. Por Dios Todopoderoso. Gotta go home. It's been rough at work, man. For the Almighty's sake, let's bring back our great America again. Let's make lots of changes to keep everything the same. News feeds keep piercing my eyes and my ears with fake needles customized for my own good. The whole screen is black, brown, and blue. 3-piece for 2 decades, so many deaths for so many centuries. Nothing new under the sun. The police keeps beating the same drum. People protesting against laws made by people I thought they wanted to be in office. I gotta do something, so I grab my phone. Sorry,
Hello,
we are closed.
If
You wanna speak to a human being? Press 3. But where's my right to be listened? Where is the law in all this? I just wanted to help. Where is the law? Where is I can't take it anymore? So I press a button in my remote. Next. Next. The crowd knows they are not alone. They keep looking for me, but I'm gone. Viva la revolución. Their signs claim over their mask-covered faces. Babel streets are screaming hundreds of names that sound like George's, but my house is in silence. All my friends are safe, and that's all that matters. So I press the button again. Next. Safety is an abstract concept, like the air George breathes no more in. I wish a safe breeze cooled these unemployed people's skin. Such a beautiful mirage, isn't it? But death is in the air, everywhere I look around. And people want to stay home. What's safest than home? But there is no home for many, as it seems to be. They've canceled their rights. It's the economy. So I press the button. I can't help it. Next. Oh, this is so much better. Essentially, life is good. Sometimes you get your daily essential grocery enveloped in your favorite warm smile for free, so you can keep going. Groceries packed by anonymous roses keep piling up on top of our conscience. Darn. Customer service, I wanna feel a complaint. Why do I feel guilty again? I can't find the button. All characters being erased. Is this one? Phew. Yes. Next. I'm so thankful for not having to go through all this. I'm so thankful for all my privileges. I'm so thankful for all God's blessings. There must be a reason for it. Right?
I'm Loli Molina. I'm a Spanish teacher in middle school. I'm also a writer, a poet, and a researcher trying to work on a crazy dissertation.
Well, I'm Jesus Redondo. I'm a Spanish teacher at high school. I always try not to be in so many things as Loli is, but here I am. I must say I'm enjoying it.
You're also a poet as well, though, Jesus.
Well, I don't know if I deserve such an honor, but I do my things.
I think that's what we all need to have T-shirts that just say that. I do my things. Whatever they are, I do them. It is so great to have you guys here. I've been wanting to get you at the museum for some time. I've known y'all's work around Colombia. I remember at a reading once that was going on outside of the State House.
State House,
yeah.
yes.
Jesus's hair was much longer then.
Mine too.
Yours too, yes, Loli. I wasn't going to call it, but yeah. So you guys have been pretty active, really around the whole Latina, and Latinx scene here, yeah?
Well, we started everything with Palmero Luna. It was a good way to start because I was really willing to just stop here when we arrived. But it was difficult, especially the language is like kind of place there that you're not sure, you don't feel confident. So with Ivan, we started doing stuff in Spanish. That was like kind of, okay. But then I was like, I think I had to start writing in English if I want to do more things here. And I was like, well, I'm going to try.
We tried to write in English for different reasons. So like I was always like surrounded by people that don't speak Spanish. In my work, with friends here, sometimes they were curious, where are you writing? It's like, no, I'm doing some, oh, you are so good. It's like, I started to do poetry. Can I read it? Yeah, but it was in Spanish, so obviously they couldn't understand that thing. So I started like reading everything in English, listening to everything in English. So English was in my natural flow of things. So I started like thinking in English and creating in English. So that's how I decided to start writing in English, and sometimes happens in English instead of in Spanish.
I was going to ask, when you're composing and creating pieces, do you do it in Spanish first?
To me, it depends.
Okay.
I think it depends on what comes to your mind. That is that little thing that gives you the first idea for something. Sometimes it's in English or sometimes it's in Spanish.
Yeah. In my case, now I would say that most of the times it's in English. This poem, I made it in English first. I don't know exactly how it sounds like. So maybe whenever I have the chance to listen to it, I would probably see that there was a different vibe in both languages.
When you read in Spanish, I mean, of course, you know, talking about a language that is very musical, and the English language is not very musical. I mean, it's mostly iambic and just kind of, you know. But one of the things that I noticed was, you know, in listening to both of those pieces in Spanish, I'm just kind of swept into the music of it.
¿Dónde está la ley en todo esto? Yo solo quería ayudar. ¿Dónde está la ley? ¿Dónde está? No lo puedo soportar. Así que aprieto el botón de mi control remoto. Pasa, 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 pasa.
I could pick up a few words here or there, but not fully understanding the meaning, but I still found myself moved by it. But when you read them in English, there were little things like rhymes I was picking up, or in yours, Jesus, when you just started to sing.
Oh, yeah.
I think what you're doing when you say, I do it, I don't know how it sounds, I think is the best way to do it. I mean, honestly.
Well, when you read in Spanish, tampoco vieron las dos cartas del banco avisando del desahucio. I see that I put more my emotions on the poem because it's more natural to me. Also, when I read in English, I pay more attention to pronunciation than to what I'm saying. I want to make sure that people understand what I'm saying or I don't pronounce a word wrong. So it's probably sounds more mechanic than natural. And when I write, it's kind of the same when I create. I want to make sure, like, I sometimes think, am I using the right word? But that's the word that came to my mind. And that's also part of the experience of writing when it's not your first language.
No doubt. I remember one time in Spanish, I tried to be real creative. I mean, we're talking basic composition here. So, you know, where I should have just kept things very simple. My favorite color is blue. And instead I would try to describe the mountains in some poetic form. And I thought I would be so smart to tell a girl that her eyes were beautiful. And instead I said her eggs were beautiful. You know, so I just kind of quit at that, but I can understand because language is something that you feel, especially as a performer of poetry, you feel like you need to own it, you know? And so if it's not natural to you, it's hard to kind of feel that way.
Yeah, I try to gather some courage and I try to be playful when it's not my language. That's why I borrowed those words from the song of Paul Simon. I don't know he's ever gonna listen to this, but Paul, I'm so sorry. I apologize. Honestly.
I think he'd be honored, honestly. So for this project, y'all were looking at Héctor Vaca Cruz's work. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in looking at those images?
It moved me so much. And it made me go back to my choices at the moment. For me, this was an experience that was uncomfortable. And that's what brought me the angle of what I wanted to bring to my poetry about it. That is like, I don't have the right to feel comfortable about this. We're not supposed to. This is a retrospective look about what happened in that dreadful year that was 2020. So yeah, I would say that it was a powerful, inspiring, and very uncomfortable experience. And I think that's the role of the artist. If you feel comfortable, then I don't know, something is going wrong with the experience.
Right. It's art, not entertainment, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In my case, I approach it from a kind of personal point of view because what I saw in those pictures, it was a lot of people that probably had something to say to other people. So that's what I chose the angle of writing letters. And this is where my personal view comes. That for us, 2020 was a year that was the first big year that we couldn't go back to Spain during summer because of the situation. It was the year that both our fathers died when we couldn't go to Spain. And I thought about how hard it is to be away from your people and go through so much stuff. So I kind of tried to put in the shoes of those people in the pictures. What do you think this person is thinking if she has to write or he has to write a letter to someone? And the one I read, it was this lady that had a poster about that she didn't want to lose her house. And I was thinking, there are more things behind these pictures that we cannot imagine. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is all the things that people go through 1 year like that, and you have no idea. So to me, it was impossible not to take a personal view in this poem.
Yeah, so many of those stories are like intertwined, and we're all connected in a sort of way. So yeah, I guess that your approach and your experiment with those poems is going to be great. It's going to be great. I want to see how it's going to be your work, how you make them connect.
When you guys write, I'm just curious, do y'all share work back and forth to each other? Do y'all work with each other on your stuff? Is it a surprise even?
It forms part of my dreams, but I'm so shy. I always try to create whenever she's not around. So I'll find excuses to go to different rooms or wherever. It's like, I don't know, there's something wrong about me.
We usually don't share stuff. Indeed, these poems I have heard his here. He has heard mine here.
This is the first time you've heard each other's? Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
We usually don't. Sometimes I have no problem sharing. To me, I tell him that writing is one of the few things that makes me feel really comfortable and like happy, like I enjoy, and don't feel nervous because I love doing this. But I know he's more shy about that.
Yeah, I enjoy the creation process and I enjoy the performing in front of people. For me, that's a release. But in between is a tension forming. That is something that I'm bringing with me. All that tension that I wanted to find when I was creating, I'm bringing to me. I needed to release it.
When it's all said and done, and the audience is leaving out of the room, and they've seen Héctor's image, and they've heard both of y'all's work, what do you want them to walk away feeling and thinking?
The experience, the human experience, is universal, and what this person is going through, it might be similar. It doesn't matter if this person came from Mexico, it came from Spain, it came from whatever. This person had to do something that maybe you had to do too, and you didn't realize.
Well, what I want them to do is to place themselves in that reality that is still happening, I take a stand. I don't want them to be the witness. That's why I created the poem. I don't want them to be neutral. I don't want them to feel fine because this is not over yet. So I want them to take a stand. So that's what I want them to do. So I apologize, guys. I want you to be uncomfortable.
That was Jesus Redondo and Loli Muñoz. We only got to play a snippet of their poems in Spanish here on the show, but you can hear the whole thing on a special Binder bonus episode out now where you get your podcast. We'll also have a live reading scheduled later in September here in the Columbia Museum of Art. You know, with photography, and really with any visual medium, there is a universal interpretation one can have by looking at an image. The difference, of course, with poetry is that if we only think of poetry in terms of language, one has to know the language in order to know the poem. But of course, language isn't the only thing in a poem. It's a big part of a poem, but it's not the only thing about the poem. I can still be moved by the way in which they are using repetition or cadence. Like I can pick up words and pick up sounds, and the way they're reading them, whether they're fast or slow, is going to generate some type of feeling in me. I may not quite know what that is, but feeling is feeling. You've been listening to Binder, a production of Columbia Museum of Art. Today's episode was hosted by me, Ray McManus, produced and edited by Drew Barron, with special assistance from Joel Ryan Cook. For more information about Binder, CMA exhibitions, and programs, please visit our website at www.columbiamuseum.org.